Welcome back to the deep dive where we sift through the source material. We try to bring you the most interesting insights. Today we're going to be looking at something that honestly really caught my eye. Nissan and Honda, these two giants in the automotive world, are joining forces. Pretty crazy. And if you like what you hear, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button so you can keep up with all our deep dives. Now, to set the stage a little bit, we're in the middle of this massive upheaval in the car industry. It's like all the old rules are being thrown out the window.
Absolutely. I mean, you see this, what is it, a convergence of trends, the rise of electric vehicles, this race towards self-driving cars, and then you have this whole wave of new competition, especially from, tech companies and these ambitious players over in China. For companies like Nissan and Honda that have really built their empires on those, traditional gas engines, the pressure to change, to adapt, it's huge.
Yeah, it's like they're being forced to completely reinvent themselves. It's crazy. So when I saw that these two giants were announcing they were going to team up, it felt like some crazy plot twist. So what's the story here? What's pushing these two together?
Well, you got to start with the elephant in the room, right? Electric vehicles. Both Nissan and Honda, they've committed to these really ambitious goals for EVs. I mean, they're aiming to electrify a huge chunk of their, fleets in the next few years. But developing that cutting-edge battery tech, building out all that charging infrastructure and scaling up EV production, that's incredibly expensive.
Yeah, it's a billion-dollar gamble for each of them to go it alone.
Exactly. And that's where their alliance comes in. By pooling their resources and sharing those development costs, they can, really take a bite out of that financial burden of electrifying their lines. Think of it as splitting the tab on this very expensive electric future.
Okay, that makes sense. But wouldn't sharing all this tech kind of dilute each brand's, unique selling points?
Yeah, that's a valid point, and it's something they'll have to walk that line carefully. The key here is going to be strategic collaboration. For example, you look at Nissan, they've been a real pioneer in EV battery technology with their Leaf model. Their expertise with lithium-ion batteries, especially their thermal management systems, could be incredibly valuable to Honda as they ramp up their own EV production.
Okay, so there's a win-win on the battery front. But what about self-driving tech? That's another area where both companies have been putting a ton of money.
So
Right.
absolutely. And it's another area where the costs and just the complexity of it are astronomical. Think about it this way. To develop these self-driving systems, you need more than just your average, car engineering. You need cutting-edge AI, sensor technology, machine learning. By working together, Nissan and Honda can really leverage all that combined expertise and maybe even speed up their progress in this, super critical area.
So instead of both doing the same work and maybe falling behind, they're basically combining their brain power to crack that self-driving code.
That's the idea. Take Honda, for example. They have this really strong background in robotics with their Asimo project. That was the humanoid robot that could walk, run, even climb stairs. Imagine combining that expertise with what Nissan's already doing with driver assist systems like their ProPilot. Huge potential for breakthroughs there.
So it's starting to sound like this alliance might be more than just, saving some money. It's almost like they're building this powerhouse of innovation by, each bringing their strengths to the table. Yeah. But couldn't this lead to, like, some corporate culture clashes? I mean, these are two very different companies.
Yeah, that's a great point. When you try to merge two large companies, each with their own history, their way of doing things, even their engineering philosophy, it can be a real recipe for disaster if it's not handled delicately.
It's like mixing oil and water sometimes. So how do they blend these cultures, without creating all this friction and conflict?
It takes really strong leadership, a ton of clear communication, and a willingness to give and take on both sides. They've got to set some shared goals, find some common ground, and then create this new unified culture that respects the best parts of both worlds.
And that's just one challenge. What about the actual nuts and bolts of integrating their, technical systems?
Oh, yeah, that's another huge obstacle. Think about their self-driving systems. Nissan has their ProPilot, and Honda has their sensing suite. They both use different sensors, algorithms, the whole nine yards. Trying to integrate all of that tech seamlessly is going to take a ton of planning, extensive testing, and probably some major re-engineering.
It's almost like trying to merge two different computer operating systems. You can't just plug them together and hope for the best.
Exactly. And then you have that potential brand dilution we talked about earlier. If they share too many parts, too many platforms, their cars could start to feel generic. They'll lose that unique character that makes each brand special.
So it's a really delicate balancing act here. They got to find that sweet spot between working together and keeping their individual identities. But stepping back for a second, what about the bigger picture here? How could this alliance impact the whole, competitive landscape of the car industry?
That's where things get really interesting. When you combine the forces of Nissan and Honda, it creates a serious competitor, one that could really shake things up. They could use their combined size to negotiate better deals with suppliers, which gives them a cost advantage right out of the gate.
And when you think about it, their joint research and development, that could lead to faster innovation, getting new tech to market quicker.
Exactly. And as they expand their EV and self-driving offerings, that puts a ton of pressure on their rivals. They're going to have to speed up their own development or risk getting left in the dust.
So they're raising the stakes for everybody.
Exactly. And this could even trigger a domino effect. You might see more mergers, acquisitions, new partnerships as companies scramble to keep up in this, super fast changing market.
So this alliance could completely reshape the automotive landscape. But how is it going to affect us, the everyday drivers out there? What's the impact going to be on consumers?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's ultimately what determines if this whole thing is a success or a failure. Well, if you look at Nissan, they were kind of ahead of the game when it came to those, mass market EVs with the Leaf. And that early start, it gave them valuable experience, not just with the battery tech, but also with understanding what customers want, how to handle that range anxiety thing.
Yeah, I remember when the Leaf first came out, people were so skeptical about the whole electric car thing. Nissan had to teach everybody about it, build out that charging network, and really convince people that EVs could actually work.
Exactly. And that experience, you can't put a price on that as the whole industry shifts towards, widespread EV adoption. And beyond that, Nissan's got this massive global manufacturing network that's already set up for EV production. They've got factories designed specifically for building electric cars, and they've got those supply chains in place to handle those huge production numbers.
So they're not starting from zero. They've got a head start, which is a huge deal in this, fast-moving race.
Yeah.
What about Honda, though? What are their strengths?
Honda, they might not have the same EV production capacity as Nissan, at least not yet, but they've got this whole other set of strengths. Think about Honda's reputation for, you know, just great engineering, their focus on fuel efficiency, and their history of innovation in things like robotics and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, their engines are legendary, super reliable, great performance. But how does any of that translate to this world of electric cars and self-driving systems?
Well, it's all about those skills that transfer over and that, culture of pushing the limits. Like, take Honda's experience with hybrids, right? You've got the Insight, the CRZ, all those models gave them a deep understanding of electric motors, battery management, regenerative braking. Those are all key parts of any EV.
So it's not like they're total strangers to the to electric powertrains. But what about AI and robotics? Those seem pretty far removed from building cars.
Maybe not as far as you'd think. Honda had that Asimo project, remember? That humanoid robot that could, walk around, run, even climb stairs. That was a huge achievement in robotics. It showed what they could do with AI sensors, motion control.
Are you saying that the same tech that went into, building a walking, talking robot could be used for self-driving cars?
Exactly. The skills and the knowledge they got from Asimo, that can be applied directly to autonomous driving systems. Think about it. Navigating a busy street, avoiding obstacles, even interacting with pedestrians, all that requires some serious AI and sensor capabilities. Honda's been working on that stuff for years.
Wow. It's like they have a secret weapon stashed away in the robotics lab. But even with all these strengths, we talked about some potential problems, right? Like those corporate culture clashes you mentioned.
Yeah. Imagine you're trying to bring together these two massive companies, each with their own way of doing things. Nissan's a little more hierarchical. Honda's known for being more collaborative, team-oriented. Even their engineering philosophies could be different. Nissan might be all about efficiency, practicality, while Honda might be more about innovation, pushing the limits of what's possible.
Yeah, it's like mixing oil and water.
Yeah.
How do you even begin to blend those cultures without ending up with, a ton of friction?
It all comes down to strong leadership, making sure everybody's on the same page, and being willing to compromise. They need to find those common goals, that common ground, and create a new, unified culture that takes the best from both sides.
And that's just one hurdle. What about the technical stuff, like actually merging their systems together?
Oh, that's another massive challenge. Think about their self-driving systems, right? Nissan's got their Pro Pilot, Honda's got their sensing suite. They use different sensors, different algorithms, the whole thing. Trying to integrate all that seamlessly, that's going to take meticulous planning, tons of testing, and probably some serious re-engineering along the way.
It's like trying to combine two totally different operating systems. It's not as easy as just plugging them together and hoping for the best.
Exactly. And let's not forget about that brand dilution we talked about earlier. If they share too many components, too many platforms, their cars might start to feel too similar, you know? They could lose that unique personality that defines each brand.
It's a real balancing act. They need to find that sweet spot, collaborating without losing their individual identities.
Okay, but zooming out a bit, how could this whole alliance change the competitive landscape? That's where things get really fascinating. When you put Nissan and Honda's power together, it creates this powerhouse, a real force to be reckoned with. They could use their combined size to get better deals with suppliers, giving them a big advantage on cost.
And their combined R&D, all that research and development, that could lead to faster innovation. They could get new technologies to market way quicker.
Absolutely. And as they roll out more EVs and self-driving features, that puts a ton of pressure on everyone else. Their competitors are going to have to step up their game or risk falling behind.
So they're raising the bar for the whole industry.
Right. And that could even lead to a cascade of changes. We might see more companies merging, buying each other out, forming new partnerships, all trying to keep pace in this incredibly fast-moving market.
So this alliance could trigger a chain reaction, reshaping the entire auto industry. But what about us, the everyday drivers?
Yeah.
How will this affect consumers?
That's the question that really matters, right? And that's ultimately what will determine if this alliance is a success or a flop. Well, in some ways, this partnership could be great for people who are excited about electric cars and self-driving tech.
Yeah. How so?
If they can share those development costs and make production more efficient, they could offer those cars at much better prices. It'd make them a real possibility for a lot more people.
So instead of EVs being just for the wealthy, they could become more mainstream everyday cars.
Exactly. And think about the ripple effects. That could bring down the price of batteries, the charging stations, maybe even insurance. It could really push us towards a more sustainable way of getting around.
Sounds like a win for everyone, really.
Yeah.
Both for us and for the environment. But what about, the actual driving? Will these cars be fun to drive?
Yeah. Now that's where it gets really interesting. If they combine all their know-how, they could develop some pretty advanced driver assist systems. Imagine cars that are safer, more enjoyable to drive. Think about it. Your car handles rush hour, navigates those crazy intersections, maybe even parks itself while you sit back and relax.
It sounds kind of futuristic, almost too good to be true. But wouldn't that take away, some of the fun of driving?
That's a good point, and it's something car companies have to really think about. The key is going to be finding that balance, between automation and letting people still enjoy driving. Maybe cars in the future will have different modes, so you can choose how much control you want.
So you could have, like, a hands-free mode for long highway drives, but then a more engaging mode for those back roads where you want to, feel connected to the car on the road.
Yeah, exactly. And as AI gets smarter, these systems could learn your preferences, adapt to your style.
It'd be like having a co-pilot who knows exactly what you like.
In a way, yeah. But let's not forget the potential downsides of all this tech, right? There are those concerns about data privacy, cybersecurity, and the possibility of these systems, messing up.
So as drivers, we need to be aware of those trade-offs and really make sure we're comfortable with the level of automation.
Definitely. It's all about staying informed, asking questions, and making sure those car companies are upfront about how this technology works, how they're using our data.
It's like anything new. There's a learning curve, and we need to be smart about how we use it in our lives.
Well said. At the end of the day, whether this Nissan-Honda alliance succeeds or not comes down to whether it's good for the consumer, Can they make EVs more affordable, make roads safer, and create a driving experience that's enjoyable and convenient?
And we'll definitely be keeping an eye on how this partnership develops and what it means for the future of driving.
It's a fascinating story to follow, for sure. And it really highlights how the car industry is changing so quickly right now, driven by technology, sustainability, and what people want.
It's an exciting time to be watching this industry, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Who knows what surprises are coming next?
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the Nissan-Honda alliance. We hope you found it informative.
And as always, we encourage you to keep digging into this topic, share your thoughts with us. We love hearing from you.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time, stay curious and keep those wheels turning.